This Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on episode 73 of Politically Conscious, is Trump destroying the GOP by attacking conservatives who dare disagree with him, and are new voter maps weakening black political power more strategically than Jim Crow ever did. Plus, we break down election results from around the country and what that could mean moving forward. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us.
These things that are Republican in nature, you won't do. You won't be able to convince another Republican voter or Trump voter or conservative ever again that you will vote against these things because you'll be afraid of getting your head chopped off like Thomas Massie. But here's what's very interesting to me, my friends, and it's all tied together. Last week I told you about the Chinese propaganda that's making everyone be against data centers. Well, I saw a story. Report, Chinese propaganda, Singham network, foreign dark money linked to campaigns against data centers. Look, Shelley, yes, see what we told you. But people are against data centers without this. But isn't it interesting that the same conservatives, the same Fox News, the same pundits that would tell you that China is going in and influencing people to be against data centers, that China and TikTok were influencing our children to hate Israel, that China and TikTok were influencing our kids to be against God, and Russia was influencing our children to be divided in the U.S. All of that came out, but nobody is talking about the nearly $20 million spent by a foreign country to get a guy out of a primary race in northern Kentucky. Nobody. They're yelling at Thomas Massie because Democrats like Thomas Massie. Okay, so what? They're not going to vote for him in a general. Everyone knows that. But why is that a hit? Why is that? Oh, I can't vote for him because the Democrats like him. Well, okay, and? But you can support the outside money flooding into northern Kentucky to get him out? While at the same time saying China's pushing propaganda to be against data centers? Oh, by the way, the president just said we need to allow 500,000 Chinese student visas. Because here's his quote, and I kid you not. Frankly, I think it's good that people come from other countries and they learn our culture, and many of them want to stay here. I think it's a good thing. Really? Huh. So the Dreamers can stay? Oh, no. That's different, Shelley. The Haitians can stay? No, not the Haitians. The Muslims can stay? Oh, absolutely not. Not the Muslims. But 500 Chinese student visas? Oh, yeah. Let them in. Chinese want to buy farmland. It's not that I love it, but you want to see farm prices drop. So that the answer to making farm prices drop is to allow Chinese to buy farmland now. Something Republicans were vehemently against not just 2 years ago. And nobody says a word. But Thomas Massie has to go. I've got a gubernatorial candidate right here in Georgia right now running ads 2 weeks ago that told you that Burt Jones wanted to allow Chinese vapes. That guy's a pro-Trump guy telling us, watch out for the Chinese vapes. I wonder if he's going to run an ad saying that we need to have 500,000 student visas from China allowed into this country and allow China to buy farmland. No, he will not do that because the Republican Party is dead if Thomas Massie loses tomorrow. And no one wants to listen to me because everybody just wants to stay friendly with the base. No one wants to tell the truth anymore because I don't want to be Thomas Massied.
Welcome to episode 73 of Politically Conscious, as we open with our brother and sometimes co-host Shelley Winters on his Shelley Winters show just a day ago, because we are on the day after the elections and Tommy Massie has been primary and lost the race in the most expensive race in the history of the country, from what I understand. But let me introduce both of our real hosts. I'm the moderator here. Emil, coming from the left of things. He's our political consultant, as well as Leo Smith, who's also a political consultant. I consider them the experts as we dialogue about clips like you just saw around the internet and give it to you straight, no chaser. You're tired of the propaganda. Listen to us. We got so much packed in today. Emil, go ahead and tell them who you are and give me your thoughts, because you said you felt on this show, you said, I think Shelley will call out his side whenever it's necessary. And clearly that's how he saw it just a day ago. And to him, Massey lost, the Republicans are dead. Your thoughts, Emil?
Emil Bryant, political consultant, author, speaker. My job is to have the candidates that work with me tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. Bad news does not get better with time. And here's the thing that Shelley said that I'll just say real quick. Shelley has been slowly but surely calling out the Republican Party for its hypocrisies, multiple. And when he does that, he's not trying to be ironic or countercultural. What he's trying to say is, where's the conservative party that I want to support? And he's being very blunt, because more and more he's seeing that the conservative party he wants to support doesn't look like the Republican Party as it's presented today. And it's going over and over again. He's seeing it more and more, and he's calling them out for it. And I appreciate what he's doing.
All right, Leo, longtime GOP consultant. As you say, a Republican in purgatory now, as you call yourself. Would you agree with our brother Shelley saying, hey, if the Massey one was the big one, and if he lost, he says the Republican Party is dead, you being a Republican, do you agree or disagree? Give us your thoughts, brother.
Well, I mean, the Republican Party has been dead for quite some time. I'm a former strategist with the Republican National Committee, former executive with the Georgia Republican Party. In 2016, I gave the opening speech to Donald Trump, and that speech really was around the issue of we needed the disruption in America to wake everybody up and to figure out what is the thread that keeps the American quilt on democracy together. That disruption it happened, but it never actually created balance. So the yin and the yang, the negative and the positive, that is sometimes needed to contrast against each other to bring us back into the middle, requires reason and courage and consciousness. When you took away the consciousness of conservative values and virtue, that was the Edmund Burke type of conservatism, which Donald Trump essentially killed it during that 2015 Republican primary. Republicans never asserted their value system to the point where a person like me, who eventually would say, I don't appreciate the values in the cultural war attack that Donald Trump is implementing as political strategy. And that's when the party was killed, way back then. I appreciate that Shelley is caught up. He is feeling the same way now. I did it. I got killed by not only some conservative media, I got killed and even attacked back in the 2018 time, but because I said Republicans did not come around and assert the values that this Democrat, lifelong Democrat, Donald Trump, has brought in here and really, really taken over the party in a way that was more than disruption. It was redefining. And here we are now, quadrupled down in this cultural war that is not about conservatism at all. I care less about the Republican Party. I care more about the values and the merit and the virtue of conservatism. Not even Shelley really talks about that much. And that's where we are now. And that's why this fox was able to come into the hen house and destroy it. And we have no other eggs that are the foundation, the nutrition of the conservative movement. And so here we are. Thomas Massey, a great man, a man of whom, when I speak to young conservatives, young Republicans, high schoolers, college kids, when I say, who do you like that demonstrates great conservative values that you learn from your granddad, your grandma, your dad, and they say, even in Georgia, Thomas Massey. But Thomas Massey was destroyed because an iconic figure called Donald Trump has almost turned the Republican Party into a cult of his own personality. Logic and reason no longer applies. Thomas Massey lost last night.
And from what I understand, I heard this on, I think, Shelley's show as well. Just to, again, I don't want to take credit for anything I'm saying, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. But you know how you can actually, and matter of fact, you can. This is something to kind of give people a source. You can go see, for example, a legislator's voting record. And so, from what I understand, Massey is 98% voting on conservative issues. Like that's been his track record, and he got pushed out in this way. And so I was curious as an independent how Republicans were all seeing it. When I saw Shelley say that, I said, let's bring that to the show and let's talk about it. The irony of it is saying the Republican Party is dead while we're up against all of this power movement when it comes to voter suppression. But before we get into that, I saw this one issue that I didn't promote, but I thought it was absolutely something that needed to be brought to the table, as I just happened to come across Mario Cuomo, if I'm saying his name right, something that he said, and I said, let me bring it to this show, because if anybody knows, there's going to be Emil and Leo to kind of give us some details, because he was. Well, I'll just play the clip. I'll just play the clip, and y'all will see why I'm bringing it to the table. Again, I didn't promote this, but it definitely. Oh, let me see. I got a comment here. Let me make sure I recommend it. It says, Audi mostly tells us everything we know about establishment in politics. Vaughn says that. Great comment. We'll definitely try to get to y'all comments as much as possible. Again, a lot packed into this show. But this quote, this cut, I'll let y'all just jump in where y'all fit in.
This may be the biggest mistake America has made in the modern era. Letting these gluttonous companies stop making chips here to save a buck, gifting our collective future to one place right off the coast of China, made me start thinking. So I started doing research. Is this why Biden made that deal with Taiwan's biggest chip maker, TSMC? Because that didn't make sense to me either. I was like, why aren't we doing it? Why are you bringing them in? And why did Trump think tariffs and scuttling that deal were a better idea? Why would he try to cancel the only deal we have going to attempt to undo this crazy reliance on Taiwan? Why hasn't this been his real foreign focus? Why hasn't this been our focus? Why haven't we not been talking about this? Have you ever even heard this mentioned? No wonder he's going to China. No wonder he's offering them AI. No wonder he's bringing the favor of the tech bros. China has been gifted proximity to our biggest vulnerability. Why isn't that money that they're pitching to go to the military going to building and training for the AI economy? Why is Pistol Pete and Trump and co. playing with this regime in Iran, which is meaningless? Even if they were right about how close they were to a nuclear weapon, and they're not. That is not the threat that this is. The real threat is not military or terrorist. It's economic. This confidential report out now from this semiconductor trade group recently revealed if we were cut off from Taiwan, we would lose over 1.5 trillion in GDP like that. That would be worse than the 2008 housing collapse. Did you know Amazon, Apple, Nvidia, those are half the companies that are driving the stock market right now? You think it's the S&P 500? No. A majority of those companies are actually flat to down. There are like 7 companies driving our stock market. That's half of them that I just mentioned. They are each and all completely reliant on Taiwan. Reportedly, they have fewer than a few months of inventory if they lose their Taiwan supply chain. And by the way, it gets worse. Even if we made the chips here, which we don't, and we're years from, the assembly and infrastructure for our products from those companies is all in Taiwan and elsewhere in Southeast Asia. I thought the data centers sucking up power, water. We got to talk about this. This is a hidden boogeyman here, sucking up all this electricity, sucking up all this water for free, not even paying their taxes, not even paying their workers. And we're gifting them this infrastructure? No. That's nothing. They're barely the fingernails on the boogeyman. These data centers are all going to be shut down if Taiwan doesn't provide the chips they can't work without. Don't take my word for how scary this is, how irresponsible this is. Take the word of Trump's Treasury Secretary.
I would say that the single biggest threat to the world economy, the single biggest point of single failure, is that 97% of the high-end chips are made in Taiwan. If that island were blockaded, that capacity were destroyed, it would be an economic apocalypse. So we are reshoring the semiconductor industry to the U.S.
No wonder these tech bros design their algorithms to distract us from this. We're fighting about this stupid, meaningless, forgettable stuff, about which side is worse, and this is looming out there.
Leo, we'll start with you. Any thoughts? I feel like we've led the way in a sense of saying Iran is not what you think it is. We got a comment from someone that says, why are we not talking about Israel controlling us? And, we've broke down that is not the case. We control Israel. It's not the other way around. The bigger play has always been China. But here's an angle I wasn't aware of until I saw this Cuomo cut. And so any thoughts from you, Leo, on that?
Well, I want to give a hat tip to some legislative leaders, some congressional leaders, some senators, and one being David Perdue, sort of a up and coming back in the late teens of running for senator as an unknown candidate. Great leader, CEO, Dollar General, not Adidas, Reebok. From Georgia, was an outsider, ran for senator, won, but it was his foreign relations and his global trade acumen from being CEO of international companies that was really valuable. And way back in 2018, when he was asked, I'm giving a hat tip to David Perdue because people ignored him, what is the greatest threat to America? He said China and its possible overtaking of Taiwan. And I'll let you know that back then, when I was working for the Georgia GOP, we spent a lot of time with the Taiwanese consulate. Governor Dill made several trips to Taiwan. We were working on that relationship quite strongly. Trump's administration changed that really quite a bit. Again, it just shows you how there's some policy things that are just outrageously horrible, and they usually comes to self-interest when it comes to what breaks him down as to being good when it comes to economic and foreign policy in some cases, and then horrible. He doesn't go from good to okay. He goes from good, in my opinion, as a conservative, to terrible. And the dividing line is usually, is he self-dealing? When he's self-dealing, he goes terrible. And that's kind of what we're seeing right here. And it is true. China is our biggest threat. And now he's trying to figure it out in a way that helps him recover from the Iran war, what some would call a debacle because he hasn't finished it and he wants out of it. And at the same time, he's trying to assert an imperial economic dominance on the world that China is really the last threat to that.
Right. So we done went from they gave us the China flu to we need 500,000 immigrants into the country. Emil, let me throw this out there because I'm pretty sure, again, I know I'm throwing this to you on the spot, but you always handle this beautifully. And so from what I understand, it was just a couple of years ago, may tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, where China specifically built up the islands to, in a sense, be that barrier in the event that they wanted to block the world from getting access to these chips that Cuomo is talking about. So, Emil, just kind of jump in, but I did want to highlight China has spent time in years prior building up. So China has been preparing. We talked about it on the show that the Iran play is really a China play, trying to slow them down, slow them access to the oil so that they don't get to so they can't speed up their process to getting to alternative fuels because the alternative fuel stuff still needs oil. And so if we can slow them down, we can slow them down from coming to compete with us as the lone what's the word I'm looking for? Lone superpower of the world. Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, so there are 3,200 acres of new islands in the South China Sea near what are called the Spratly Islands. That's also called the Great Wall of Sand. And that's where, if you look at the globe, you'll see the South China Sea is right next to Taiwan, and that there's a lot of opportunity. The Straits of Taiwan, the space between Taiwan and mainland China, is where all of the tension lies, because that little gap is where China can very quickly do something. Now, what's the something that they're going to do? This is where the islands become very important. China controls over 1 million fishing vessels. So in addition to its blue water navy, it controls 1 million fishing vessels that feed its people. So it's not inconceivable that they could just put 100,000 fishing vessels in the Strait of Taiwan and do nothing but fish. And that would be a problem, right? Just that alone. Then China could put naval vessels in the Strait of Taiwan and do nothing other than patrol for safety, right? There's a ton of different scenarios where the Strait of Taiwan gets clogged up by China. What would be the other way to access the port in Taipei? It would be the South China Sea, the place where the islands that have been created were. Yeah, so that's why it's there. So remember, we talked about grand strategy, cat and mouse, the bigger picture of all of this. I am not convinced that the Iran play is strictly about China. I do not believe it's strictly about China. I do, however, believe that the United States, in trying to play this grand strategy game, is looking for every lever it can find. Venezuela was the first lever because China was Venezuela's biggest customer. The second biggest exporter of oil to China was Iran. So now we have this going on. But then there are other things that are at play, because remember, China has a robust relationship with nations in both Latin America and in sub-Saharan Africa. So they're also looking at oil from other places besides Iran and Venezuela for the very reasons of why we would have attacked them, knowing that this is possible. So you're seeing this incredible game of grand strategy played out on a global stage where we're trying to figure out what will stop them. The president did something that was unprecedented, because just a few years ago, under the Trump administration and the Biden administration, there was an embargo on the most advanced chips going to China. NVIDIA makes 2 chips that the Chinese want. The second most powerful chip, called the H200, was banned until this trip. We said, oh, you can buy those now. So there's this big kerfuffle happening. There's big brouhaha happening because, wait a second, weren't they banned from that? Yes, they were. And China was developing its own domestic chip production capacity. They're about 2 generations behind, maybe 3 generations behind NVIDIA, who is the world leader right now. The other world leader is AMD. If China continued at the pace it was going to catch up in about 5 or 10 years. Remember, I told you in another episode, there's chip making equipment that only one place in the world makes, and that's in the Netherlands. So China was at that mercy too. But all of their capacity is locked into AMD, NVIDIA, and TSMC. So you are seeing all of this stuff play out where the geopolitical part of this, the Strait of Taiwan, the South China Sea, the oil, and the chips are all working simultaneously. And it takes a lot of really brilliant strategists to figure out how to push here and affect there. Right. And you're seeing all of that play out in real time. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it and think what you see is all there is.
And that's what Politically Conscious here is here for. Thank you, Emil, for the details. Just again, for everybody watching, when it comes to this geopolitical game, we're not even telling you what's right and wrong. We're just talking about, in a sense, here's some things that we're looking at. Here's some mistakes that were made, but we're not judging it because we've said long term this might end up being a brilliant play. But again, it still has to play out for our country in the long term. And that's just keeping it real. We're trying to figure out all those levers that Emil just broke down. All right, let's move on to some other topics. Love all the comments out there. Sorry, I'm not getting to them as much as we want. Got somebody says, hey, we stand with President Trump. Somebody says, trying to get a couple comments on here real quick. Kenny77, who's always watching, says there's no way I would vote GOP today. It's a party full of lunatics. Biden said we need to focus on quality and technology. Trump took a torch to the 19th and 20th century policies. So again, thank y'all for watching. All right, let me get to this next cut and kind of move this conversation in a different direction as we now talk about the big item for the African-American community, if you will, what's happening with these voter rights. So I want to play out something that happened prior to what just happened, just to give some context. And this is a cut from Gary Chambers, who I play often on this show.
For all those who agreed with Mr. Huggathug the other day, tell me if you agree with Governor Jeff Landry today as he discusses the Supreme Court ruling that strikes down Louisiana's second majority black congressional district. Watch this.
Congressman Troy Carter just put out a statement that this dilutes the power of black voters here in Louisiana. How do you respond to that, Governor?
I disagree with that. I mean, look, I think this whole race baiting race issue on the redistricting has been put to bed finally once and for all. What it says is that listen, the legislature and the people control the pen, not the federal government, not a federal judge. This is the legislature. Remember, that legislature represents the people.
Now, Jeff says that it's race baiting for black people who make up 33% of the state of Louisiana to want to have equal representation in Congress. No, we don't want taxation without representation. Secondly, the governor says that the will of the legislature is a reflective of the will of the people. Well, the legislature drew state maps that robs Louisiana of black voters of 8 to 10 seats in the legislature, which allows them to pass all of these racist maps. And if you don't think that this will impact you, Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, is already encouraging the legislature in Tennessee to redraw their congressional maps to eliminate all black and Democratic congressional seats. She's running for governor of Tennessee. Now I want you to listen to State Representative Edmund Jordan, the chair of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, as he explains the racist history of Louisiana stripping away black political power.
Just reminds me of 1868 when John Willis Menard was elected by the people of Louisiana and was not seated by Congress. And then in 1873 and 1874, the people of Louisiana, mostly African American as well, voted for PBS Pinchback, our former governor, to serve in the U.S. Senate, and he was not seated as well, both of them because of race. And I'm sure people had their valid reasons for which they said. This brings me back to 1898, the 1898 Constitution here in Louisiana, where we went and dealt with, created this non-unanimous jury to uphold the supremacy of the white race. And so we've got all these things in this backdrop and all this context that we're dealing with. And I just wonder, how do you want history to remember you? Because we are going back in those same lines.
Now I live in Baton Rouge, and this is my Congressman Cleo Fields, and that is Troy Carter, the congressman from New Orleans. Listen to Congressman Cleo Fields, who this exact same thing happened to in 1995.
And the courts ruled that they were right. The legislature went back and eliminated the district. Here we go again. I've never served a day in Congress without a lawsuit in the Supreme Court. Louisiana's minority population is over 33% black. People have a right to participate in their democracy. If you tell me that I gotta jump a certain height, I could probably do that. Tell me I gotta run a certain district, distance, I could probably do that too. But if you tell me I have to be white to serve in Congress from Louisiana, I can't do nothing about that. I need some help from my government.
That's right.
And that's why we need to pass, as soon as possible, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
The congressional seat that Congressman Fields holds was eliminated in 1995 by a Supreme Court ruling. Louisiana has not had a black member of Congress for the Baton Rouge area or North Louisiana since 1995 until 2023. This will be the second election for Congressman Fields since this district has been created. But I want you to listen to old Jeff Clandry as he tells you that if Trump calls him, they are prepared to respond here in Louisiana and take away the seats of both Congressman Cleo Fields and Congressman Troy Carter.
In the other room mentioned President Trump.
Emil, I'll let you jump in again. I think that just walks through the actual case that brought all this about, right? And so again, for anybody watching, all of this is prior to what's already happened, but I just felt like we need to get some of that context. Again, I think Gary Chambers just does a good job of kind of given details when it comes to politics. But your thoughts on what led up to where we are today and how any of that is relevant to today. You're on mute. You're on mute, brother.
Since these were recorded, Tennessee's already redistricted and Louisiana's stopped a primary. The governor stopped a primary as it was unfolding so he could fix the map, maps. Those tell me everything I need to know about what's happening in this process, right? This isn't about fair representation or anything else, because again, we said in another show, it was white legislatures who controlled those legislatures prior to this ruling. So they had already drawn the most favorable districts they could in light of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2. So when that was changed, they wanted to redraw the districts to make them even more favorable to their side. So there's no doubt in our minds that the change to Section 2 based on the Supreme Court ruling was not just strategic, it was not just surgical, it was strategic, and it just decimated the potential for Black voters to choose the voters that they say they want. Here's what's interesting.
Leo jump in real quick.
I want to compliment Emil because you said something different than Cleo Fields. Cleo Fields of Louisiana, old guard civil rights nomenclature, is part of the problem, because Cleo Fields said, and I wrote it down, what they're doing is saying that I have to be white to represent the constituents in Louisiana. What you said is, Emil, is that they are changing things, and I didn't write your quote down, to create power for their side. I want people to notice the difference between an old school civil rights nomenclature based on history, meaning race, and what Emil said, based on political partisanship and control and power. If you don't graduate to Emil's thinking, you have lost any ability to fix this. Because what the Equal Protection Clause says that a stacked Supreme Court, is relying on in order to justify this redistricting is that the Equal Protection Clause strictly says that race redistricting is strictly prohibited. Government cannot treat people differently based on race. Now, what they've done is strictly interpreted that as meaning you can also disenfranchise white voters or da-da-da-da. So as long as you keep talking about this in terms of race, you're going to have trouble fixing this issue. Because the real issue is not that Black people in a 33% state representation of being Black voters, it's not about them being represented by a Black person. And see, that's the old school thinking. It's about them getting the representation that they want, that reflects their values, their interests, their needs. That's what it should be about. And as long as old school civil rights people keep talking about it as, oh, we need Black representation that has to look like us, we're going to lose this fight.
Let me play this clip real quick, because it's just perfect timing. And Leo, I'll let you kind of respond to this clip. And Emil, you can kind of wrap up this part of the conversation before I go to another clip that takes us in a different direction. But again, I love where we're going. Again, this is politically conscious, trying to raise the consciousness of how you see politics.
The basic bottom line of this case is if you're a smart racist in the Deep South, you can get away with it now. If you're a dumb racist in the Deep South, you can't. And here's what I mean. If you're the dumb racist, you're going to say, we need fewer Black members of the House. You'll talk about your racial motivation out loud. And in that case, under this opinion, Once you see explicit racial motivation, you can act. But let's say you're a super smart racist and you say, I really don't want more black representatives, but because a political gerrymander is totally fine, I'm just going to tell the court that our desire to diminish black representation was actually a desire to diminish Democratic representation. And if you challenge me on this, I'll say, well, look, it's not my fault that 92% of black voters vote for Democrats. I'm aiming at Democrats. I'm not aiming at black voters.
But you don't even have to be a racist to think. Right?
No, you can also be just a partisan Republican. But then the question is, in the absence of a confession of racism, how do you know the difference? And so the practical result, I think, is going to be that the political gerrymander, even if it almost 100% maps onto race, is going to be acceptable in the absence of a confession of racism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the shortest bottom line way of analyzing the case.
If gerrymandering is the concern, why not just go after gerrymandering and institute some sort of national system that actually fixes the problem? Ultimately, the defect of the civil rights program was always to try and enshrine in law these improvements of society that are racially obsessed. That is the mistake.
Lots of people in America are racially obsessed in very negative ways.
Especially in benevolent ways, in my estimation.
Negative and benevolent. Trust me when I say the South, while having made a lot of strides, there's a lot more going on there that's negative than we might want.
I think this is along the nuance that you're speaking of, Leo. Continue your thoughts and reaction to that clip.
Well, I mean, that's it. And so, I mean, the gentleman asked the questions about gerrymandering, just going backwards to forward. The reason is because it has benefited both sides, and neither side has wanted to give up the power of gerrymandering, right? Because they can both use it for purely partisan reasons in order to have not ideas or best governance win, best representation win, or the power of the people win, but strict partisan power is how they've used gerrymandering. I love how the gentleman described the difference between a dumb racist and a smart racist, or a racism that might be downstream of partisanship and partisan power control versus partisan power control not even being the issue. Someone just wants to attack black people. And he calls them the dumb racists. Well, Cleo Fields, I'm going to get back to it, is a dumb anti-racist. And I'm not trying to insult the congressman, but that position where you're trying to justify this purely on race, if you don't describe the corrective action that was once needed, and if you're not then talking about those issues that gentleman brought up in the South or anywhere, in Lowell, Massachusetts, or wherever these things might be happening to disenfranchise people for representation, then you're not getting to it. So you've got to, as I've told civil rights leaders for years now, I want to be on your side, but you've got to start giving reason why some of these laws still exist. You got to talk about the reason for them. And as you talk about, and I'm going to tell you why these civil rights leaders haven't done it. They've been so controlled by far left liberal people that the civil rights leaders don't make the argument on the restorative justice aspects of 1964 and 65 laws because they don't want to exclude non-descendants of slavery. They want to create such a wide cast of we do all these good, heartfelt things, justice-related things for all people. While they may benefit all people, you still got to make the argument that there are direct things happening to descendants of slavery that wasn't just about black people, but was about slavery and its continued impact based on Jim Crow and the nullification of people in the democratic process. If you aren't making that argument specifically, you're losing for us.
I think I agree with Leo Emile. What are your thoughts about him? I don't know if you've.
So I've
heard Leo talk about this before, but I feel like we are talking about how to walk through this thing properly versus the propaganda and the verbiage that makes us feel like we're not getting anything. Like I hate that we say we don't get anything from politics, but I get why people do. Is because the people that lead us use language and propaganda to the extent that we feel like we're not getting anything but that's not what really happens. And that's how somebody worked so hard about a 30-year process to get us to this point today. It took 30 years for them to do what we're now saying, oh, Lord, let's go have a protest. Like, if it took 30 years, they really understood the process to do what, in a sense, was done through the political. Like, it's like if you understand that's what was done to you, quit saying and making it so simple. It has to have strategy, like Leo is speaking about, in my opinion. Sorry, I didn't mean to go that long, Emil. Jump in there, brother. I'm sorry.
Well, so this is, first of all, let's go back real quick, because in South Carolina, a lawmaker said, we are not changing our districts because it will drive black voter turnout. He was very clear about that. He said that on the dais in the legislature. So we know it's about race. He just is the one who said it out loud because he's not changing the maps. So now let's get to Leo's point as to how we're going to thread this needle, because that's the part that's really hard here. And what Leo said, I'm going to agree with both of y'all. This is exactly how we do it. We are going to have to take out some of the fear that black people got something because of legislation, and start acting like it's okay to address historical grievances. This is not a problem. Let's be very blunt. Redlining and how the GI Bill was applied and all the things that happened affected generations of black people in America before and since. So let's not play around and say, oh, well, we have to. Now, here's the fun part of this conversation. And I say fun because when black people do well, all people do well in America. That's the truth of the matter. So let's start talking about how the effect of improving things for black people results in everybody else improving. We can have this conversation and say, look, we're going to target this legislation to help black people, but black people are going to go to banks to buy homes. They're going to go to stores to buy more things. They're going to do things that improve the economy for all sorts of people. We're going to start more businesses and hire other people, including black people. So yeah, we're going to do things that benefit the overall economy, but you're going to have to message that differently than what we've been saying. And here's the problem with the messaging that Leo called out. I'm going to call it out slightly differently. You gotta stop thinking that people are not adult enough to handle the message that the history of this nation can be fixed. It can be. And we're just going to have to be grown-ups and say, we're doing this because we have some problems that must be addressed directly. And stop this nonsense about, well, it feels good if these people over here are included or these people over here are included. No, we're all going to benefit once we get the baseline right. The baseline.
Well, here's the thing, Emil. Let me say this, and I'll go to another clip.
That need to be addressed.
I understand that, and I'm not even disagreeing with you. I just want to make something clear for anybody watching. It's not that everybody, you said are going to benefit. It's already what happened with the legislation that our ancestors already got us. Everybody that came thereafter has benefited, and sometimes we make the mistake of seeing, I'll just point it out to make a clear example when we say, look at all the white women that did benefited from DEI. Yeah, until the thing gets put in place, they could not benefit. So it started with us, and then of course it moved on to gender. Like, we actually look at that as a negative thing and like look at something as though we didn't get something. No, we still got something. It just moved on to others. So I'm saying that to say the reality has always, we've uplifted the country whenever we've gotten anything that has already been done and still will be done. We're just afraid to say it as a country in general, Democrats and Republicans alike in that instance, from my perspective.
And this is why, to Leo's point, we get stuck in this old civil rights mentality. I agree that the old civil rights mentality needs to retire, not die, retire. It needs to go out to the North 40 where it can do what it does and graze and be there when we need it as a historical reference. But the bottom line is we have an economic reality and we have a political reality. Those arguments will not address. But there are arguments we can make that address our issues today that do not call those arguments back into the forefront of the conversation.
Let me say this real quick and I'll let you go, Leo. And this is right now, we're on the cusp of what made me start this show. I say our ancestors got us to the first step. We've relied on their tactics when the second step does not require. It requires what Leo, they already got us to the point where we can make the arguments without being so reliant on race in a multifaceted, multicultural society. We misuse it and hurt ourselves unknowingly because we circled the wagons looking for something for just us. And the argument cannot be made that way when we're 13% and you have to make an allegiance to move things in politics. So we must learn and finally understand that game. That's what Malcolm had wanted to teach us before he was taken from us. He wanted us to understand the science of politics so that we would make the right allegiances. Allegiances don't have to be there all the time. It could be temporary to get what you want. That's how politics get played. But we think, oh, look what happened to us. And we want to circle the wagon and use the old tactics that will no longer serve us. Go ahead, Leo.
And I want to say this because I don't want to, I said Cleo Phil is a dumb anti-racist. What he has been culturally anti-racist, meaning his intelligence, which is there. And so I want to respect him. It's apropos for 1964. and that's what I want to make clear. Back in the day, it would have been enough for a Black person to learn how to save money, find a bank where you could trust your money, and just get a bank account. My humility is such that as I raise my children, I have given them access to a game, a field, a market play, right? Where my knowledge is not enough for where they can now play. And so I've given them an education, sending my son and my daughter on to higher levels of education. They're studying finance. They're studying investment banking. I don't even understand some of the stuff that those kids are going to learn. And that is why then I will let them manage my money. That's humility. That's love to the point where you can step aside. What I'm asking Clyburn, Cleo Fields, some of these old folks, and the new people who step in and try to do the same thing, following those old models like Hakeem Jeffries and some of the younger people. We don't want just younger people. We need new, innovative ideas carrying people who are willing to humble and say, yeah, that was good for then. But Black people have transcended into a space where we can now operate with different skill sets, and we need to require a different capacity. And from Jasmine Clark to other people, is there if we demand it.
I love it. Let me play this clip. This is an interesting clip that's definitely worthy of politically conscious time. This is a thought that Stephen A. said recently. And I have members of my club, for those who know, I run the Mental Dialogue Community Club, that have been beating me up for years because I leaned into, I've been an independent for a lot of years, right? About 15 years now, at least, maybe longer. And I've said African Americans specifically, because of our unique positioning as the second largest voter bloc, we're the third largest population group in the country, but we're the second largest voter bloc, that we are uniquely positioned. If we were to become independents, we could decide all the close races. Stephen A. took that even further with the philosophy that I don't necessarily would agree with, but it was something that he said, and Van Lathan had some thoughts, and I wanted to get y'all thoughts on this as well. We'll let you respond because he goes real hard at the conservatives, Leo, so I'm going to let you respond first after Van Lathan crucifies Stephen A. for what he offered.
I don't want Black people to be disenfranchised. I don't. I want them to have desperate political representation. I want people to be desperate for Black rights.
I wish for one election that every Black person would vote Republican.
But then I thought about something about Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith loves the ladies.
He does.
He does love the ladies, right? It doesn't matter how bad it's going with the ladies. You know what Stephen A. Smith is not going to do?
What?
Try some dick.
What I want is to put ourselves as a community in a position where both parties have to work to get our vote.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because that's not who Stephen A. Smith is.
Okay.
Because as bad as it gets with the ladies, Stephen A. Smith is not going to go out and go, maybe a little dick will help. Something that's completely counter to my identity and what I want and need. It's not going to do that. I understand people saying, hey, Black people should experiment politically. And I think that what that means is that Black people should experiment politically to the left of the Democrats. They should experiment politically with things that are humanistic and are things that are based in justice and working people's rights and, healthcare and things like that. But how could you experiment with the Republicans? You want me to vote for disenfranchising black people? You want me to vote for making DEI a cartoon character monster, like making blackness like an American deficiency? What are they offering? Vote for them. Vote for what? Vote for women losing their bodily autonomy? Like, vote for what? When you say stuff like that, what are you talking about? Like, what am I voting for? By the way, the Republicans are not failing to cater to black people because they don't think they can get the black vote. The Republicans are failing to cater to black people because their base is obviously and viciously racist.
With all the things that you just said, I guess the word flabbergasted comes to mind, but it's just,
I love that word.
It's just not a well thought out point. He's like, it's simple.
So Stephen A says, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. Go ahead, Leo. Go ahead. You're on mute though. You're on mute. Say it again. Yeah, start up. Come off mute.
California is left of Democrats. New York City is left of Democrats. So this guy, there's a lot of shock value in what he was saying. That was some crazy stuff. But I understand why he was given the shock value. He's trying to make a point about Stephen A. Smith. But Stephen A. Smith is not the first person to say that black people's political power might be emphasized if they basically stop voting with that large majority vote giving to Democrats in a reliable way. No other racial demographic does it as much as black people do it. And so Latinos especially, they will shift back and forth and lickety split. Black people haven't done that, and primarily because of this cultural symbolism that we try and represent through partisanship, and that is a big problem. To the left of the Dems, you would not have much influence in politics unless you do it at a more localized level. So let's look at California. Left of the Dems, is that helping black people in any significantly unique way? I'm going to let you answer the question. Let's look at New York City now for the next couple of years. You'll be able to see whether or not Mandami, clearly left of regular Democrats, will black people all of a sudden start to have such a mecca there that Charles Blow, New York Times writer who said everybody should move to the South, so all of a sudden he's going to say, move to New York City because that's the mecca for black people. That's Shangri-La for black people. Let's test this theory that if black people go far left of the Dems, that all of a sudden is going to be great for them. I think the better strategy is that black people should get platform-oriented, policy-focused, right? Just like we've been talking about a couple of times here, that we should hold to our policy platform, and anybody who does not, appeal to that policy platform and is willing to work on that, then we should not leverage our vote for them. I think even more powerful than voting Republican. I'm a Republican by voting history. I'm a conservative by values and ideology, but even more powerful than that, voting black people all now just voting Republican, as Stephen A. is saying, would be black people not even voting. Now, I know that's, oh my God, now that's shock value too. How dare you recommend that black people not vote? So if they don't vote, they're saying to the Democrats, see, here's the impact, our not voting. If you don't serve us, here's the impact that it will have on you. And that does a different thing, because if you vote for the Republican, I don't disagree with the gentleman. You're almost encouraging them, even if it's just for one cycle, that some of this ridiculous cultural war policy making is okay. As a black conservative Republican strategist, I'm a loyal partisan, I can't sign on to some of this nonsense machination that is culturally oriented. I can't do it. And I'm even starting to call out other black conservatives who aren't saying anything. Okay.
Let me ask you this question, and then Emil, you can go. So, and I've always said this to Shelley just one-on-one. You have to own the part of the party that Van Lathan, I think, correctly says. I'm not going to say correctly. I think he broad brushes it too much. Let me be real clear what I'm about to say. But I think he correctly highlights the viciously racist as part of the Republican Party. There are racists on both parties. There are racists in both parties. There's a lot of data that proves that. I'm not going to bring it to the table here. However, the viciously part is the policies and the enactment that, as Emil highlighted in South Carolina, he openly said it, but now there's a way, they obviously use a strategy to go around the openly saying we're trying to disenfranchise the black vote, which is how the KKK started to disenfranchise the black vote, just to bring that history into the context. So there is that aspect, and we talk about how Trump catered to that aspect, but that wasn't just the Republicans. That's how he's taken over the party. He brought in people, as Shelley always says, that are Trump voters that are not necessarily longtime Republicans. So I'm trying to say it as fair as I can, but there is a vicious aspects of policies that come after us, even above and beyond voting. So what are your thoughts about that part, Leo? If you could at least address that, because Shelley, in my opinion, runs from that being a part of the Republican Party.
Well, certainly. I mean, again, when he comes after, say, affirmative action, or he comes after DEI, or he looks at some of the funding that might have been for his own opportunity zone policy that he set up in his first administration, when he starts now there's a little bit of hearkening about, do we support or not support HBCUs, which again, in his first administration, he was big on that. Okay. So this is all because he's yielding to the white cultural fears, the cultural war, those kind. So that's the kind of stuff that a conservative like me, I don't like, that you're doing it based on. If he offered reason that made sense, I'd be a little bit more opening to at least having the engagement on the ideas, but that's not what he's doing. And so that is exactly the issue at hand here, is that we lost an election. We lost an election that put people who believe in justice, fairness, equitable action, merit. We lost to a guy who decided that none of that stuff's important. As a matter of fact, he's reversing now. This slush fund, for instance, is an example. He's now saying, I am going to appeal to white grievance so much that the things that might have been restorative action for black people, restorative funding of certain act, I'm now going to do it to white folks, even if they want to destroy America. He's just going to do it out of the symbolism that I criticize that black people apply. He's now using symbolic gestures of, I'm going to give you free money just so you'll like me, and just because you're white and angry. That is some horrible stuff. And so that's what we're dealing with here. Those policy initiatives need to be really, really, really robustly discussed, not just condemned, but we got to discuss them.
Now, I thank you for owning that aspect. Emil, can you give me a quick thought? Because I want to keep y'all an extra 10 minutes if y'all at least have it.
For sure.
Y'all both have at least an extra 10 minutes. I'm asking, I hate to make you short on this one, but I want to get to these other cuts too. So let me literally give you a response. I've had you sitting quiet for a minute.
The Latinx voter is the experiment that should squash what Stephen A. recommended. They voted for Trump, and they are feeling the FAFO effect, and that is a lot of the things that they said they wanted, they got, and now they're screaming bloody murder, because for many of them, that is not what they actually experienced. The deportations and the things that are going on especially in the Latinx community, are absolutely because they voted him into office. And that is where that swing goes both ways. And to Leo's point, I'll just say it this way. Yes, there are racists on both sides, and I'm not vicious, violent, virulent racists on both sides. The difference in the Democratic and the Republican Party is that there's more of a tempering voice in the Democratic Party than there is in the Republican Party. And that tempering voice is where I think a lot of black voters, they feel something that makes them say, I can't go there yet. So what I would recommend that the conversation in this case is at the local and state level, where it makes sense, be willing to pick the better candidate. Absolutely. And then to Leo's point, start focusing on policies at the local and state level that have a significant effect on your day-to-day life. That way you can show, hey, I will vote for you, not because of the R or the D, but because you support the policy that changes my day-to-day life, my ability to raise my family, that allows me to leave my state, my city better for my children than it is for me.
Yep. Yeah, Stuck to Carmichael. I don't care if the racist wants to lynch me, I only care if he has the power to. You understand what I'm saying? And so, like, I remember one time Leo said on this show, I prefer the covert races over the overt races. Well, what happens when it comes to policies, if, like I said, if I heard Shelley say this on his show, talking about the liberal who will call the police on you because you're in their area because they've moved to they moved into the neighborhood. So now they're calling the police on you. And he says, they're more racist than us. I'm like, no, Shelley, don't say they're more racist. That same liberal won't have a policy that makes it more expensive for my child to go to school as a black child. I'll take the calling of the police because I'm not doing anything. I know how to handle the police. I want to make sure my child goes to school with restorative justice that this country we deserve. That's not like that's a reality. Like Leo, real quick, we know what's going on. Think about it. Your son is okay because of how you set up your son, who's an excellent opportunity to go to Ivy League schools. Right now, under these current policies, there's other kids that's just as smart that if they're in my town in Honey Path, they got to come up with something completely different and have no shot to go to some of these Ivy League schools now just based on the funding. The funding's changed. They ain't they're smart enough to get in. Getting in is not the issue, but can they really afford to go now that the funding's changed? These are real life consequences that happens from politics for all those who say, what am I getting out of politics? I got to go because of politics. Right. Go ahead, Leo.
And the other thing that you lose when you decide that you can't step into a network because of racism is that you also lose the ability to have that network then advocate for the very value system, the structural changes that you're trying to make, those people who have power, adjacency, etc., that real adjacency. So what happens is most Black and poor people live in communities where there's no network. So if they want to get into Harvard, right, and then you got a great, smart, brilliant kid in South Atlanta somewhere, there are going to be fewer Harvard graduates living around them that can go advocate for them to get. It's not even just about the money. It's about, do you know a Harvard grad? Do you know someone who served on Harvard's board of regents? My kids actually know people who actually worked and served on the boards at Ivy Leagues.
Nice.
They're going to encounter racism once in a while, but they're also going to be able to rise above it because of the access that they have.
Yep, and that's the reality of understanding politics and policies when we sit out here and say, do we even need that? Hold on, make sure you understand what the policy does. Don't listen to the rhetoric that's being said from both sides. Both parties use propaganda to the extent that you don't actually understand what's happening. All right, let me at least highlight, we just finished election day yesterday. And so I came across this from Marcus Farrell. I'm not familiar with this brother. I'm just going to bring it home to Georgia, Leo. So very curious at your thoughts on, because people are saying that what's happened recently with the Voter Rights Act, they're saying, hey, this may backfire. Like the irony of the beginning of this show when we talk about if the Republicans dead, why we see them exerting power, but yet I hear Leo saying, hey, the Republicans have been dead, and now I got this brother saying this, and it's pretty curious at a time like this. This actually gives me hope not because I'm agreeing with him 1,000%, but people are starting to think beyond the old tactics that we just talked about. So this is pretty curious to me. I want to hear what both of you think about.
The Republicans in Georgia haven't learned yet, so Black people will kick their ass again. Miss me with all that. As a Georgia Atlanta metro resident and as a statewide organizer, I know the numbers here. I know the counties here. I know what happens when Republicans start acting like Atlanta is something you can just carve up and neutralize. Good luck trying to cut up ATL. Too many Black folks. Too much turnout power. Too much history. Brian Kemp just opened the door to another redistricting fight with a special session starting June 17th. After Georgia already had to redraw maps in 2023 because a federal judge said the state needed more Black opportunity districts. So let me say this clearly. Y'all are about to catch a Tyson-level ass whooping. What shocks me is I really thought Brian Kemp was smarter than this. I thought he had enough sense to stay quiet after Georgia already showed Republicans what happens when Black voters get irritated. But no, here y'all come again, which leaves me with two possibilities. They're either going to cheat in a way we've never seen before, or they're going to cheat in a way we've never seen before. Because what else is left? Y'all lost to Ossoff, y'all lost to Warnock, and you lost after Georgia's own Republican election system did a full hand audit, then another recount, and still said the results were right. Brad Raffensperger said they never found systemic fraud that could overturn the election. The Fulton County ballot suitcase story was ruled false and unsubstantiated. So no, Atlanta did not steal anything. Y'all just got beat. Ossoff won by 54,944 votes. Warnock won too. And that was not magic. That was black turnout, metro turnout, and organizing. The Washington Post found that if black turnout had dropped to more normal runoff levels, Ossoff likely loses, meaning black Georgia was the margin. Again, on purpose. And Republicans know that's the real problem. That's why every loss turns into purges, voter challenges, polling place nonsense, and intimidation theater. In 2022, officials had to clarify that people could not just challenge voters at the polls after mass challenge campaigns took off. ProPublica reported right-wing activists filed 89,000 voter roll challenges in Georgia. The ACLU of Georgia even had to fight a polling place move to a police station in Clayton County because apparently somebody thought democracy should feel like a traffic stop. And that is why I'm telling you, Atlanta is the center of the beast. Hateville, South Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, Gwinnett. Y'all keep poking the exact places that can bury this whole little scheme. Keisha Lance Bottoms is leading the Democratic field. Jason Estevez is in it. Michael Thurman is in it. There is a bench here. There are multiple Democrats who can make this very ugly for Republicans if y'all keep turning this into a direct insult to black Georgia. Georgia Republicans haven't learned ish. Follow and subscribe, because if they want to redraw the map, we're about to redraw their whole understanding of what losing looks like.
Hey, they out here thinking, man. And Shelley, I listened to Shelley's election coverage last night. I listened to the end of it, and he was highlighting that something that stood out to him was that Keisha Lance Bottoms won without a runoff. And he thought that was very, very powerful, and he was surprised by it because she was up against 7 people. And so his thought was Republicans had been saying that's who they want to win. They thought she would be an easy win. And Shelley saying, I don't know, with her running with no runoff, he came the strategy that the Democrats will use and how much money will pour in to her coffers to help her compete again in what is considered a purple state based on what happened with the previous sister. Her name slips my mind right now.
Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, Stacey Abrams. And so, and that, that wasn't always done above board. That's the power of politics. I'm just calling it what it is. But it happened. It's real. Georgia competes as somewhat of a purple state. And Shelley last night said, I don't know if it's going to be as easy as we think it's going to be, because at one point, the Republicans saying we want to go against her. Hey, this brother right here says people going to mess around and find out. What y'all think?
No, I think you, the gentleman made a very, very compelling argument. He used data. The reality is that in 2013, I was hired because Republicans saw that writing on the wall. And they thought demographics are going to be destiny, meaning Georgia is growing in its racial diversity, especially the power of the Black vote and the great turnout that Black people were showing in many cases was in excess of white turnout by incredibly significant numbers. So that gave an opportunity for someone like me to say, I want to assert conservative values that Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans bring to fore. And I was able to convince them to have a minority voter engagement strategy based on conservative ideas and merit, not based on trickery, right? And so for those years, up till Donald Trump, I operated as a GOP strategist using those kinds of methodology. Now, I'll be quite frank with you. What happened was there was always an element within the GOP base that was happy to have minority voters come and vote for white Republicans. But I got a lot of hit back, strike back from all kinds of people, from some GOP chairs to grassroots activists. Well, we just wanted to some elected officials. We just wanted Black people to vote for us. Leo has also created an opportunity and a pipeline of Black leadership in the GOP. They did not like that. There was an element that didn't like that. And that led to, of course, with Donald Trump coming on and seeing a racist universe of voters, which would equalize and create equalization such that they says, oh, Leo, we know that what you're doing is the right strategy, but Trump's strategy of just mobilizing the racists, is a quicker strategy, and we don't have to change our values and go Uncle Bob and all the races in my back room that we try to say, don't say that around, public people. They didn't want to have that person become, isolated now that Trump was there. And so Trump gave those people, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an example of one of them that said, I'd never even voted before, but I like this white cultural war stuff that he's talking, and I'm jumping in. So now, right. So now, but you never address the fact that these demographics are changing. They don't have to be destiny, but you can't beat what's happening to the world. We are
so what happens is what we're witnessing now that we're so alarmed about is just really that pushback saying, let me hold on. I have a thing in my book, Re-Education of the Negro, where I call it the browning of America. Like, that's what's being fought, right? And it's the last grabs of it. It's inevitable. Hey, what they say in Matrix is inevitable. It's Mr. Anderson. You hear that, Mr. Anderson? It's the sound of the inevitable. So we're not lost. Again, Marcus Farrell, props to that. I don't know how I even came across this. I guess things just come across when I need them. But it just props to the fact that it's being thought out in a much better language than the stuff that we've just on here. Go ahead, brother.
And let me put a fine point on it. So if you look at the crosstabs and the numbers based on yesterday's elections in Georgia, yes, it's you don't go too far with this, folks who are Democrats and liberals. But yet the activity, the momentum, the turnout of Democrat voters was much greater. I would say almost 20% greater than Republican voters in this election this cycle that we just went through yesterday. So these are primaries, these are activist voters, but definitely Democrats are more energized based on all this nonsense that Donald Trump's Republican Party is doing.
All right, I want to shock everybody that's been listening. This is Representative Wesley Hunt talking about the voter rights based on how he see it as a Republican in Texas. And I want to hear both of y'all thoughts on this passionate viewpoint from him.
I'm seeing a lot of talk from my colleagues on the left, too, as we shift toward this reinvigorated talk about Jim Crow and the past of this country. And as someone who is a direct descendant of a slave, as someone whose great-great-grandfather was born on a plantation, I can assure you slavery is over. Jim Crow is dead. When I go anywhere, I don't see any white-only signs. I don't, I promise you. I am a black man that represents a white majority district in Texas. The great-great-grandson of a man born on a plantation stands before you today as a proud conservative Republican from Texas, as a believer and follower in Christ, and as a believer in what this country can be if we allow equality for not just Muslim Americans, not just Buddhist Americans, but also Christian Americans like yourself. God bless you, young man. You give me a lot of hope for the future of this country. Thank you for having the courage. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Let me say this, and I'll let you respond first, Emil. So something I challenged when we first started Politically Conscious, for any, like whether you agree or disagree with what you just heard, I've always said we all must learn to be respectful of anyone's lived experience and stop saying people are voting against their interests. I'm walking into something here, right? And so Wesley Hunt gives his lived experience. That's his lived experience. Here's a reality when we talk about Texas. I'm so glad I came across this clip. Here's a reality. He says, I'm a black representative for a majority white area. We just talked about a few weeks ago why Jasmine Crockett, who's probably more qualified than Tallarico, could not win because they're concerned that white Democrats won't vote for a black candidate because they assume the black candidate can't win against the GOP. Well, we readily have white conservatives electing people like Wesley Hunt. That's a challenge to Democrats having that thought. I'm just kind of bringing a lot. This is Politically Conscious. You hear what you see where I'm going, Emil? Jump in there because Shelley always brags about that. White people will select the black conservative quickly, but Democrats are always dancing. They're always trying to get around. Like, okay, can we really win if we go up against this person? Like, and you and I both have complained how the Democrats won't speak up for what they've actually done for black people for the fear of not being able to get the middle of the road conservative. Like, let's call it what it is. And I respect what Hunt said based on his lived experience. That's his reality. You can't take that from him. Go ahead, Emil.
My lived experience is I've never seen a whites only sign, and I would never say the things that he said. So I don't want to hear that his lived experience is simply that he does that. This is the problem I have with people who say what he says, because he's comforting the people who don't wear the hood and who don't use the N-bomb, as if that's the only.
I'm challenging you
No,
to.
I'm going to tell you how I perceive his talk.
Okay.
Because that's how he makes other people feel good in their comfort, when they're actually just as virulently racist as people who do have the hood. They just don't use the language or have the attire. I'm not telling you that's exclusively who he appeals to, but I promise you he makes a whole bunch of people feel real comfortable saying what he said, who otherwise, if I were to show up in their neighborhood, would not see me the way they see him, because I'm a foreign one of them. See, I know the people who are like that on both sides of the equation, and I'm not willing to give them a pass because his lived experience doesn't have a white only sign.
Let me jump in here real quick. In college, my rugby team in college, post game we play all these drinking games, and one of the games was the spoon fight game. And both people would be blindfolded, but unbeknownst to one of the participants, both people would put spoons in their mouth and they do a tap game to create submission of the other person, blindfolded, both with a spoon in their mouth. What one of the people would not know is that the other person had a spoon that was specially designed, that was huge, okay, monster spoon, heavy. And that person, when they went with their little spoon, they would hit them over the head with the big spoon. They think, what skill did this guy have that with a tiny spoon, he's able to impact that much damage on my head? I want to take the big spoon and hit Wesley Hunt on the head with it and then say, hey, it's over. I know you got lumps on your head, but it's over. Jim Crow is over. Slavery is over. That can be, two things can be true at once. Yes, slavery is over. I even say that, but I say it within context. Jim Crow is somewhat over by legislative action is over, but it doesn't mean it's culturally over. It doesn't mean that it's no longer a value system. It doesn't mean that the impact of the banging on the head with a bigger spoon is not still lasting. What a dum-dum like Wesley Hunt won't acknowledge because he's performing for his audience. It's true, Montoya, that white people, white districts will vote for a black conservative. It doesn't happen often, but they will do it if the black person performs and does that. If they do that well enough, and Hunt does it well enough. Now, a better example would be Byron Donalds. I think he's less of a minstrel show. Okay, Hunt is a minstrel show. I'm just going to say it. I'm not that kind of black Republican. Okay, but Byron Donalds is a better example. There was a brother who represented South Texas, who was also a person of color, a black descendant of American slavery. He was a CIA agent. Again, substance can still win.
Let me ask a question.
That's there. I want to make that difference.
Yeah. Love both of y'all dialogue. Here's a question. My question is, and Shelley, hopefully, I'm trying to get him on next week. He's put together this thing that was on his page. We're going to talk about it next week. But could someone make the argument that Wesley Hunt presents the policies that they want so they could win? So could they challenge someone that says, well, why can't a Jasmine Crockett present policies and win in the way that Democrats think you can't? I just want to, and I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to have a dialogue about how the conversation happens racially, if I'm making sense.
Sure.
This is the conversation that Leo was bringing up earlier about culture war stuff, though, Montoya. Mm-hmm. This is where the culture wars have been so virulent in the last several years that it's very hard for a black conservative not to play those culture wars. He said Christian American versus Muslim versus Buddhist American. I'm like, why would you even say that when the country identifies as majority Christian, no matter what you say? Right? Those are all those kinds of culture war nonsense.
But I'm asking for the Democrat. If somebody uses him,
let me get to you on that one.
Yeah. I want to hear that part of it.
Keisha Lance Bottoms has an opportunity to talk to rural Black folk in a way that she could appeal to rural white folk. I'm not going to tell her to try to woo people from the other side. But what I am going to tell her to do is make sure that she can articulate policies that make rural Black people feel included in her governorship. If she figures out how to message to them, she's going to get a lot of rural white people too. But she's got to be able to talk a rural conversation as much as she can talk a general conversation to the people of Atlanta, because she was the mayor of Atlanta. So in my opinion, this Democrat, especially in that context, has to be able to say to the people outside the metro areas, I got you, I hear you, I can speak the language that allows you to be heard and represented in the governor's mansion, and I'm going to make sure that I advocate for you. And I think if she does that with rural Blacks, she's going to have a really surprising return with rural whites voters as well.
All right, one last passionate one from the other side of the aisle, and then y'all give me these last thoughts, and we out of here.
I have no doubt in my mind that the map's gonna pass. If y'all can give us less than 0 seats, you would do it. Y'all do this under the orders of somebody that said the Civil Rights Act was harmful to white people, that it caused reverse racism. RFK said that Black children are overfilled on antidepressants and that they need to be reparented on different farms, all of them. Pete Hegseth constantly brings Doug Wilson to the Pentagon to give a prayer service. Doug Wilson is the same pastor that said that slave owners were on strong spiritual ground. I don't have no belief in no morality on anybody that followed Donald Trump. If you wasn't with this map, you wouldn't be underneath this president. You wouldn't be in your party. You would stand up, you would stand against it, you would speak out about it. So as far as I'm concerned, if you here as one of these Trump Republicans, you already showed us who you are. You showed us what you want to do. And I believe the country as a whole is rebuking your party. Y'all are in a death spiral. That's why y'all have to redistrict. That's why y'all have to cheat. That's why Trump got to go to Texas and say he entitled to 5 more seats. It's because y'all know what y'all doing is abhorrent. We letting our people die in Iran based on false pretense that Tulsi Gabbard and Joe Kent said ain't real. Y'all okay with all that. So I'm positive y'all gonna be okay with the maps. But the beautiful thing is, the children that y'all have made and the people that's younger than y'all don't support none of this racism that y'all want. The MAGA party is the last breath of the Confederacy. And I'll be happy to see millennials and Gen Z bury y'all. There will be no more of your party. The midterms gonna come, y'all gonna get wiped out. Trump gonna get dragged out of the White House, and I'ma love every second of it. Because y'all loved every second of the suffering that he caused to everybody in this country. And worldwide, we starve in Cuba. We bomb Nigeria. We holding Zimbabwe and Zambia hostage for their minerals. We don't want to give them aid support. The pro-lifers that say all life is special, y'all letting kids die of AIDS. What part of your Bible say that? Point out the scripture. I think everybody would love to see it. And we would love to see y'all in the midterms.
So Massey Lucen, don't make me think he's right about what's going to happen in the head. Don't make me think he's right, but he was a passionate, informed voter. I would consider him an informed voter. It's not about whether he's right or wrong, but Leo, just your thoughts about his passion. And that's all we're trying to do is raise the level of consciousness. The more informed you are, the better decisions you will make. And I would call him an informed voter, obviously taking the time to go in front of a legislator and give a passionate thought to say, hey, I know you're going to change the maps anyway, but here's how I feel. Leo, your thoughts about that, brother, and then Emil, you close us out, and I may close out with something I wrote today, but go ahead, Leo.
Or I'll be quick about it because I want to hear from you too. Yes, the brother is wrong about Trump. The Republican Party will not be over; it will be weakened. And it will have to rebuild based on its conservative values, a tried and true traditional platform of things that work in modern society for a modern democratic republic that we can all maintain. We will work on that. There will be people like me who won't become Democrats, who doesn't see that the Democrats going to be better for my conservative values, who will then work to restore principles in the Republican Party that reflect our values. That work's going to take a while. And yes, we will lose some races while we rebuild that. And there will be turmoil. But the party will still exist. We have a two-party system. It's pretty strong. Republicans, yes. And I want everybody to understand one final point. Parties exist to maintain themselves. And so, yes, it's absolutely true. If they could have zero Democrats turn out, that's good. That would be considered a good goal. Democrat strategists think the exact same way. You just don't they're not just acting on it. Maybe he's not engaging with them enough. But if you work for the Democratic Party of Georgia, Illinois, or wherever, your goal is to have zero Republican votes.
Makes sense. Emil, your thoughts, and I'm going to share this thing that I wrote today, which I think gets to the cultural issues that are always being played. I hope that if you're watching, we're not focused on just the cultural stuff. It's raising the conscience on how to do politics. It is very, and I've always said this from a philosophical standpoint. I consider myself a philosopher. If you don't govern yourself, you don't have control of your area. So the idea to be devoid or be one of those 89 million who don't come out and vote, and people think, oh, just come out and vote is all that's ever asked. No, you get things for real, and you have to govern yourself. So we're hoping that that's what we're doing, raising the consciousness. Emil, your final thoughts, and then I'm gonna read this piece real quick.
The nation was formed with the thought that a government was by, for, and of the people, and the part of that conversation that often gets left out is it's called the consent of the governed, right? We give consent to our representatives to do what we ask them to do on our behalf. It makes it a little bit less messy than a direct democracy. But in order for that to happen, we have to have voters like the one you just showed who have that passion and who have that information. Whether or not you agree with every opinion he had, the fact is he was calling out specific policy issues with which he had a problem, which meant he was at least informed enough to know those positions. He wasn't just on a bandwagon. He wasn't just spouting off propaganda. He was actually talking about specific policy initiatives that had ramifications he did not like. When you have voters who do that, they're dangerous to both parties. And what more Americans need to recognize is that we're not dangerous enough to both parties as voters. Shelley said it in one of his shows. He said, if you believe in that AIPAC money, if you're scared of Donald Trump, you need to be scared of me because I'm the voter. That's the way we should all be thinking. You better be scared of me because I'll fire your behind in a heartbeat. And that kind of passion right there leads to great outcomes, regardless of if he votes on one side or the other. You want that kind of passion linked to the kind of information he was bringing to the table. More power to him for being that kind of voter.
Thank y'all. I'm going to just share this piece for everybody out there watching. I'm a philosopher. These are the political experts. I'm not the political expert. I give my little 3 cents from time to time. This is just a deeper thought because unfortunately right now we're still having the race issue. W. Du Bois said coming into the 1900s at the turn of the century that race was the issue. Well, we're in 2026 and we're still race is the issue, and people say because we're making it the issue. Here's what happened to us, and I just hope people think about this. If you say we understand the elite position, the construct of race to ensure their own security, then white and blacks continuing to see one another as the enemy is continuing to fall for the trap. Race in itself does not conclude anything other than the ability to withstand the sun or not. Tell me what region of the country you live in, and I will guess way more correct things about the food you eat, your vernacular, and even your belief system than I ever could by simply seeing your race. Again, it is I'm sorry, give me a second. Okay, again, it is a trait that least determines any kinship, but it was misconstructed by the elite who now use algorithms to play the race card against one another. So sorry I stumbled through it because I just wrote it. I'm reading my chicken scratch, but I'm just not having us think above and beyond why if we don't teach the history, they've moved history, this recent like I say, this transition. Trump didn't attack history his first administration. History has been vehemently attacked this administration. And so not learning the history is why we won't understand this whole construct of race. And it was used to pit us against one another. It's still being used. And now they have the effect of algorithms. If you fall for the propaganda, then we can't passionately come together and actually defeat those who are trying to rip us apart. And if they can keep us uninformed and apart, then the things that we complain about is how they win. So that's my challenge to anyone who's watching and understanding why we exist. Thank both of you for the extra time today. Great show. See y'all next week. Thank you, brother, for the extra time.